Haridas Thakur ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Did we just get into a social distancing thing here? Or, I mean, it's okay. It's unusual, but we're okay. As long as no ladies come, they'll have to sit in the back. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 19th day of October, 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in Chapter 2, entitled Contents of the Gita Summarized, Text 59, page 125. You ready? Kind of. Okay. You're not ready. Can you give him your book and take his book? Because he has trouble. Yeah, that's it. Just give him. There we go. Okay. Thank you. That's the problem with this social distancing. It's too far. All right, text 59. Here we go. Vishayavani vartante Niraharasya dehinaha Vasabhajam sopyasya Param drishtva nivartate Vishayavani vartante Niraharasya dehinaha Vasabhajam sopyasya 59. Param drishtva nivartate Vishayavani vartante Niraharasya dehinaha Vasabhajam prasopyasya Param drishtva nivartate Vishayavani vartante Niraharasya dehinaha Vasabhajam prasopyasya Drishtva nivartate Vishayavani vartante Niraharasya dehinaha Vasabhajam prasopyasya Param drishtva nivartate Vishayavani vartante Niraharasya dehinaha Vasabhajam prasopyasya Param drishtva nivartate. Glenn. Vishayavani vartante Niraharasya dehinaha Vasabhajam prasopyasya Param drishtva nivartate. Ed, you want to try? Go ahead. Vishayavani vartante Niraharasya. No, go ahead. Niraharasya. So Niraharasya, not Nara. That's it. Niraharasya dehinaha Vasabhajam sopyasya Param drishtva nivartate. Vishaya, objects of the sense, objects of four sense enjoyment, vinivartante, are practiced to be refrained from. Niraharasya, by negative restrictions, dehinaha, for the embodied. Rasabhajam, giving up the taste. Rasaha, sense of enjoyment, api, although there is, asya, his, param, far superior things. Drishtva, by experiencing. Nivartate, he ceases from. Translation. Though the embodied being may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. Purport. Unless one is transcendentally situated, it is not possible to cease from sense enjoyment. The process of restriction from sense enjoyment by rules and regulations is something like restricting a diseased person from certain types of eatables. The patient, however, neither likes such restrictions nor loses his taste for eatables. Similarly, sense restriction by some spiritual process like Ashtanga Yoga, in the matter of yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, etc., is recommended for less intelligent persons who have no better knowledge. But one who has tasted the beauty of the Supreme Lord Krishna in the course of his advancement in Krishna consciousness no longer has a taste for dead material things. Therefore, restrictions are there for the less intelligent neophytes in the spiritual advancement of life. But such restrictions are only good until one actually has a taste for Krishna consciousness. When one is actually Krishna conscious, he automatically loses his taste for pale things. Om jnana timarandasya jnanandana salakaya chakshu unmidatam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So I'm just going to read the translations quickly from 55 up to through 58, so we can get a view of the context here. It's because it's very interesting and very pertinent to our own efforts to be Krishna conscious. So Arjun posed some questions in 54, asking how the person who is in samadhi, whose intelligence is fixed in transcendence, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus submerged in transcendence? How does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit? How does he walk? So then Krishna starts answering those questions. O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind thus purified finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. 56. One who is not disturbed in mind even amidst the threefold miseries, or elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called a sage of steady mind. 57. In the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. 58. One who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects, as the tortoise draws its limbs within the shell, is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. And in today's verse, though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remains, but ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. So what we see here is this description in the first 4 verses I read, 5 verses, of the characteristics of one who is fixed in Krishna consciousness, although he doesn't use that term. He doesn't say one who is always thinking of me. He just describes it. One who is unaffected by whatever good or evil they obtain. He doesn't say how you get there. But the present verse analyzes that and tells you how you get there. And that in the key is Param Dristvana Vartate. That little word Param stands for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. He says far superior things. And that far superior things is the Supreme, Krishna. So this is the key verse, because the basic principle that's being discussed here is how we can turn our attachment from material to spiritual things. Because those attachments are what brings us back again and again to this material life of birth, old age, disease, and death, and suffering. Despite all of our efforts to forget about that, through the process of sense gratification and mental speculation and all the different things that occupy our life, that's the stark reality of it. And all of those concerns we had in our previous life, all of those aspirations and those things we thought important, it all just exploded like a bubble when we died, or even before we died. And now it doesn't have any meaning. And the things we're so concerned about in this life are also meaningless, ultimately self-defeating, because they're going to fill our mind, the subtle body, when we leave our body and bring us back again. That's why in the morning class we're going through. I finally found your ideal brahmachari verses that are not so. It's Prahlad's instructions to his friends. Because Maharaj brought up this yesterday, the silkworm. So there's a passage there that's just so descriptive of the dangers of material family life, just weaving all of these attachments and these concerns and everything. And then you become trapped like the silkworm. And the next life, you have to go through it again. So this verse, I think many devotees, after a little while in Krishna consciousness, you can say, yeah, this is what I'm experiencing. Right? So in other words, we may try to, on a very kind of mundane level, people are often addicted to things in this world that they want to give up. Food, I'm getting too fat, that's a big thing. Multi-billion-dollar industry, people want to slim down, right? What to speak of substances like tobacco and alcohol and drugs and all these different things, right? So you may by force of will, you say, okay, I'm giving it up. I've had it. I've quit cigarettes now 4th time. This 5th time I'm definitely going to do it, right? Or alcohol is even worse. And you may not consume them. This word niraharasya literally means don't eat. In one sense, you're consuming all the objects of the senses, and especially obviously something you eat. So if you don't, you read about it, you talk about it, you take a vow, whatever you may pray, and you give it up. You just eat carrots and celery for a week. That's all I'm going to eat. So, but that the taste remains, and you know very well if you just walk by that McDonald's or whatever it is, and you see the pictures of the Big Macs, and you're finished. You have to go around, you know what I mean? In other words, the temptation can go off. I've never been an alcoholic. I used to drink beers when I was 18 years old. Okay, that was like 55 years ago. So I never got to the point where it was an obsession, where I was really an alcoholic. But I've known people who have. You may not know this. I don't think Ed, you were coming around at that time, but I don't know. Was it 10 years ago? The years are going by so fast. There was a fellow who walked in who came up from the AA. There's a big AA meeting up the street in a church, and he wandered down here somehow, and he became attracted. He started coming around here, but he was still connected up there. And he asked me to come up and speak one time, because he said there's a lot of similarities. One of the things is the sangha, the association. How, because Krishna consciousness involves austerities and giving things up, and you were so conditioned, habituated to a certain kind of lifestyle, it's not easy. But it becomes easier when you're with other people who are doing it, who can give you the spiritual strength like that. So the same thing is there with the AA. That's the whole idea, is that you're there and everyone stands up, yeah, my name is Daniel and I'm an alcoholic, and so you kind of find a confession, right? And because I went up there, and then you say, but here's my little coin. I've been sober for 6 months. Oh, Daniel, nice, you're cool. In other words, helping them, encouraging like that, because it's a struggle. Your senses, as Krishna so nicely explains at the end of the next chapter, lust or material desire invades the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. And so when the senses become addicted to something, that's what they really call addiction, like heroin. But if you're just addicted to pornography, that isn't, at least maybe now it is. Now you can say, that's a new thing. But it used to be, it has to be some physical thing that forced you to do it. But the point is that there's a struggle. When you realize that these attachments are harmful for me, and the devotee realizes that, any material attachment, even the ones that are so-called wholesome, are damaging because they bring you back again and they keep you bound up. So how to get rid of not just the gross material attachment, but all of them? So there's a process in devotional service that's exactly based on this verse that illustrates it. And that is that, there are restrictions, 4 exit principles if you're serious, and other restrictions. But there's also a process by which you can, and I love this word, sublimate that attraction to wholesome things, like chanting the holy name. Because that's the best way. Param drishtva navartate literally means to see, directly perceive the Supreme. If you're able to do that, you'll get a higher taste, and you'll lose the lower taste. That's the whole point of this little purport that Prabhupada wrote. And then there's no more struggle. In other words, I used to be the ordinary guy, and I'd like to recount how I remember when McDonald's started. I think it was 1960, something like that. I don't know. Anyway, but all of a sudden there were these sprouting up. A variation of what they have today is developed at the same arch and the whole thing, and it was great. They just opened. We used to do bowling every Saturday night, me and my friends. And suddenly there was a place we could go to and have, a snack afterward. We had the fries and cheeseburger, whatever the heck it was. And that was. I was just regular guy, and I became accustomed to that. I liked it. I wouldn't say I was addicted to it, but it was one of the things that was part of the array of my sense gratifications. So so these things are all vishayas. This is called vishaya, objects of the senses. Vinivartante are practiced to be refrained from. So if you're spiritually inclined, then you have to wean yourself away from these things. And the only practical way to do it, and Prabhupada talks about you're not going to do it by going off into the mountains and practice Ashtanga yoga. Not in this age. A handful out of billions can do that. But you can very practically do it right in the middle of a big city if you have a powerful means of experiencing the Param, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and giving you a higher taste, and then you just laugh at it, or you cry. You say, "Boy, I wouldn't think of doing those things again." There's no temptation. It's not like it's pulling your consciousness. Whereas if you're just, in the, some kind of a AA is something you meet. Usually it's locally, but you also can go off somewhere and you have a retreat, where all the people are trying to give up some drug or giving up alcohol or something. That's more intense. You're kind of committed to it. So, but still, if you go by the bar, if you just sit it down, or your friend invites you, it's danger, you could fall off the wagon. The desire is still there. The same thing comes up. I just hearing Prabhupada give lectures. I like to hear different parts of the Bhagavatam. You have so many lectures. So now I haven't heard this in a while. The whole pastime of a Jamil and how he's the holy name is features there. The context of that is directly pertinent to this. Maharaj Parikshit heard the fifth canto. Now the fifth canto was very rich. There's a description of the forest of material enjoyment, just like now we have this extended allegory of Paranjan, the living entity, conditioned soul, and it's illustrating how he's buried in sense gratification and he'll come back. So the forest of material enjoyment is there, the teachings of Jad Bharat to King Rahugana. And then it goes on, and then there's a description, hair-raising description of the hells, some of them. Not even all, I think there's 25 of them there or something like that. And, oh my God, I worked on that chapter before during the marathon. I think I mentioned it to that before. And that was like you're working at all hours of the day, and here I am in the middle of the night, And if someone is too much attracted to illicit sex, then when he dies, he goes to this hell. I forget the name of it. And then you have to embrace a red-hot iron figure of the opposite sex. And you get burned up, but you don't have any body. It's just a mental thing. But it's as real as if you have it. But it's like a dream, a very real dream. And then it happens again and again and again. Oh, my God. It's like hair-raising. So Maharaj Parikshit was shocked. And he was like, "Oh, how, he's a kind-hearted Vaishnav." Now, one of the qualities of a real Vaishnav is the Sanskrit is para dukkha dukhi, which means I really feel your pain. To be empathetic to others' suffering and want to do something about it and know what you can do and give them Krishna consciousness. So Maharaj Parikshit asked Shukadeva, goes, "Well, how can these people be relieved so they don't have to go to this hell?" So first he tested him. He tested a prick and he described the process of atonement, which is similar to what the Catholic Church and the churches, say. Well, you come and you confess, and then you'll get absolution, like that. But the idea, I guess, is that you're not supposed to do it again and again. But that process doesn't give you the higher taste. And so if you're addicted to something, you're just going to keep doing it again. So this is what Maharaj Pariksit said. He gave the analogy of the elephant bathing. He says, okay, that's well and good. I forget the whole Sanskrit. The last line is, Manye kunjara shochavat. My opinion is that's the bathing of an elephant, which means that the elephant goes, he's all dirty from the forest and the dust and everything. So he goes into the tank, he goes into a lake, and he's got a perfect, portable shower, thing. And so he gets all clean, but he's wet. How's he going to dry off? There's no big gumsha, there's no towel big enough. So he has to roll around on the path to get dry. He's all dusty and dirty again. So the point is, you may restrain yourself from these things and come to the point, okay, I've got it together. But the desire is there, and eventually the circumstances come, and down you go, and you're still attached. The attachment is there. So Ajamil was it's a wonderful story. He was a Brahmin, it doesn't say he was a strict Vaishnava, but he was a Brahmin basically, and he was a Vaishnava of a certain standard. So he was out in the forest and he was collecting wood, for the fire and everything. And he sees a couple, a low-class man, Katori, and a prostitute having sex in the forest. So he loses it, He loses his composure. He eventually marries the prostitute, and he has all these kids. He becomes like, he loses all of his Brahminical qualities for a whole lifetime. But as a he was trained as to be religious, and so he named all his children, which he was having into his 80s, which is a sign of lack of self-control, after names of God. And the youngest son, he's 85, about to die, and his youngest son is a little boy named Narayana. So it's very graphic. He's on his deathbed there, and he sees the Yamadutas. I think they have a name for it in the hospital. Terminal restlessness. He says, Mr. Jones is seeing things again, they shoot you up, so then they put you out. That's the solution they have. But rarely they're starting to see the dogs coming. So he's seeing, these horrible-faced, threatening Yamadutas coming to yank him out of his body, So he, out of fear, he calls out for his son, Narayan! And as soon as he does that, the Vishnu Dutas come and stop the Yamadutas. They're stronger, And the Yama said, What? He's so sinful. They started, listings, and he was, a thief and a prostitute hunter his whole life. He's one of ours. And so the Vishnu Dutas just laughed and said, you don't know the real laws of religion. So they went back, the Yamadutas went back to Yamaraj, and he started to explain the potencies of the chanting of the holy name, and how if you just chant once, purely, and he didn't commit an offense because he may not even have been calling Narayan, but he wasn't committing any offenses. He wasn't doing on the plan of sinning again or anything. He was just desperately chanting. So he was purified. He became purified in that instant. Now, he didn't get pure love of God. See, this is the distinction. The prema requires more purification. But to get rid of your karma, it just requires a little chanting once. So anyone here who's chanting, I guess everyone here in this room is chanting the name of Krishna. Okay? So, whatever karma you do in this life is still, you're making a new record. But all of your lifetimes, you see how beneficial it is. That's why Krishna says earlier this chapter, or did he say? Yeah, I think so. Or was it coming up? Before. In this practice of Krishna consciousness, there's no loss and there's no diminution. Wow. Anything you do is your permanent asset. And swalpamapyasya dharmasya, just a little bit. Alpa means a little bit. Sualpa means a very tiny bit. Swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahado bayat, delivers you from the most fearful type of danger. What's the most fearful type of danger, Yeah, losing your human birth. Having to go down again and go through all of that and finally come up. It may take you 100 years, 200 years. Or worse, you go down. So how great is that? You know, it's like you go through school. Okay, you didn't graduate, but you're not getting expelled. You just have to repeat that class. You know, you never get expelled. It's a permanent thing. But yeah. Well, I mean, you have a chance to do better next time. So that's what's going on with this verse. He, by directly perceiving the Supreme, which is what we do when we chant Hare Krishna, with a little attention, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we know, right? We may not understand, but we know that the name is non-different from Krishna. Krishna is there in his name. As Lord Chaitanya says, he's invested the name with all your names with your potencies, all your potencies. So that means we can associate with the Lord just by chanting his names. Now it's inconceivable, but if we do it and we try to avoid the offenses, we understand the philosophy, then we quickly can become fixed in renunciation. That's the point. Is that it's no longer a struggle. Although we have to be careful because the desires may still be buried in there, but it's possible to actually become detached from these objects of the senses and eventually become free completely of the desire for that stuff. You know? I mean, we've seen so many devotees. So that's what this is all about, and it's describing how one can get to the point where you can be like, 58, where when you're not using the senses for Krishna, you just withdraw them. You don't go into something else. Or when where the miseries, the difficulties of this life don't disturb you so much. Yeah, that's how valuable is that? And then on the other side, Sukeshu Vigataspраha, when the temptations come, you can say no. All that at 56. And then this phrase which comes up, I think, 3 times in the Gita, Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha. That's kind of a standard. Giving up attachment, fear, and anger. And you can see how, central those are to our material mentality. So so this verse I always thought was it's kind of one of the first verses I memorized, because you experience that. If you really dive into Krishna consciousness, I'm able to, suddenly these obsessions now are weakening. Now just one little editorial note. The way Prabhupada originally wrote this, by the way, Prabhupada, just for your information, for the first 5 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, he actually typed out the manuscript. There's no dictation. That came in because it was so early on, they didn't have the dictation. And I think it was Gargamuni who saw it in the window, the dictating machine, commonly called the dictaphone. That's the brand of dictating machine. And he said, well, maybe Prabhupada could use this, it would speed up the books. And he was right about it. So he got the instruction manual, everything sat down, and miraculously, Prabhupada knew how to use the thing right away. Where did that come from? Because he didn't have one in India. He was typing with 2 fingers. The whole first canto. You imagine that? On this ancient manual typewriter. So it sped things up. But this one he typed it out. And what Prabhupada wrote is something like this. The embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, but the taste for sense objects remains. Which is perfectly logical. Somehow the first editor turned that but into a though. And he thought they were equivalent. The embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense object remains. That's where we had it for years. In fact, it wasn't revised like that in 1983. But eventually we said, no, that's a concessive. Means, in spite of the fact that this is going on, this is going to happen. In spite of the fact that the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense object remains. So that though belongs at the beginning, which is where it's been now for the last 15 years. So these are the adventures of editing. You see how it's clearer that way? Okay. All right, any questions on this verse? Yes, Prabhu. Well, hold on. Hold on. Here we are. For the peanut gallery. You have to turn it on for...
Yeah, okay.
Is it on?
Is it?
I don't know. You have to push it up till the light goes on. Is the light on? Yeah, all right. So put it up for a little bit. Just go ahead. Just start. No, he's fixing it. If the light is on, it's on. That's it. Just hold it real close. It means the volume is down over here.
Okay. All right. Okay.
That's better.
Yeah, that's better. So, what really caught my attention here in this purport, Ashtanga Yoga,
Yeah.
the manner of yama, niyama, asana,
Pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and
And it
samadhi.
just rang a bell. That's based on the sutras of Patanjali.
Yes, it is.
And that is the core of self-realization fellowship with the followers of Yogananda. That's what they base their whole faith on. The practice of
yeah, Ashtanga, yeah.
But then, then he follows and says, recommended for less intelligent persons. Knowledge of whoa. Talk about, tell it like it is.
The problem is, I mean, Krishna will go into detail on this in the 6th chapter. That's called Dhyana Yoga, and he goes through, and it comes up a lot. So it's not that it doesn't work. It's just that for us, it's impractical. It may be practical for a few. Prabhupada talks about how, when he lived in Allahabad, Prayag, they have this Kumbh Mela there every 12 years. And he said he saw 2 of them. He lived there for over 13 years. So huge numbers of people. I mean, it gets bigger every year. It was like 30, 40 million this year, or the last time it happened, just a few years ago. So during those big Kumbh Melas, I don't know if they come down for the smaller ones, but it's not that far from the Himalayas, right? And so you get various groups of these Ashtanga yogis coming down. Guys with ashes on, they wear no clothes, They may be 300 years old, they look like they're 50. Yeah, Prabhupada said. But I read a story, I think it was a story in National Geographic, because one year because it's quite an amazing thing, On the cover of the National Geographic was this young lady with the word Ram tattooed repeatedly on her forehead and all over her face, which is kind of, Ram, Ram, Ram. So anyway, apparently there was almost like a riot because they have to send the police. It's a whole, can you imagine 40 million people suddenly coming to one spot? And so they probably said they build a whole city practically. They have roads, they have post office, they put up lights, and everything. So, but the yogis who come down, they want to look for liberation. If you bathe at the confluence of these 2 rivers, there's also the third one. It's called Triveni, which is invisible, Saraswati. At the precise astrological time, which is always in January, it's freezing cold. Prabhupada actually took the devotees there twice, and they just in Yamuna's biography is fascinating. She was walking out that down to the river in the winter, no heat, and taking a bath, and so there was like a rumble, because you had these different groups of yogis, and they wanted to all bathe at the exact time. So I don't think they had weapons. Maybe they're just using their fists, or maybe the mantras, whatever, But they had to break them up. The police were there. Actually, I think there's some soldiers, to break up the room. And meanwhile, the devotees went, and they're not worried about when to bathe, They're there to distribute prasadam, chant Hare Krishna, maybe distribute some books, because Krishna consciousness automatically includes liberation. It's a byproduct. There's a wonderful verse by Bilamangal Thakur where he says, near the end of the Krishna Karnamrita, Bhaktis tvayi sthidatara bhagavan yadi syad daivena nak padati divya kishora murti mukti swayam mukulitanjali sevate sman dharmata kamakata yaksamaya patiksha. So I don't know if you picked up on the word mukti. So the first line he says, my dear Lord, Bhaktis tvayi sthidatara. If one is fixed, sthidatara, in bhakti to you, then eventually you'll get the real fruit of that practice. It's not mukti. It's a vision of your wonderful adolescent form, beautiful form. In other words, your darshan. That's what you're looking for, a direct association with Krishna. And as far as mukti is concerned, liberation, she's waiting at the door with the anjali. Mudras are really important in Vedic culture. So this is the service mudra. It's common. They have pushpanjali. Now you notice there's some space in there. You can keep something in there. Your ardent prayers, your heart, some flowers, right, to offer. So Mukti herself is at the door waiting to serve me. In other words, I've already got Mukti. And as far as Dharma, Artha, and Kama, which in the context, there's these 4 Purusharthas, goals of human life. And one is Dharma, religiosity, and then which results in peace and prosperity. That's the Artha. And with that, we can enjoy in this world. And then when we get really a little intelligent, we understand, well, this is just self-defeating. I really want mukti. So that's the fourth of the four purusharthas. But you know what the fifth one is? Prema purushartha, prema panchama purushartha. Is the real goal of life is love of Krishna. Beyond even mukti, what to speak of the other three. So he's saying, he mentions all four of them. Four of the first ones in this verse. He says, mukti is waiting for me. That's the most valuable. And it's whatever I need in terms of dharma, artha, and kama, they're also waiting to serve me. So bhakti takes care of everything. Once you focus your mind on Krishna and you become determined to know him and love him, then that's all you have to worry about. Everything else comes in its train. And Krishna says, and this is where faith comes in, I carry what you have. Just fix your mind on me. Ananyas chintayanto mam yejana payupasate tesham nityabhyaktanam yogakshema bhahamyaham. He says this in the 9th chapter after illustrating how self-defeating it is to worship the demigods. Because if you're successful in worshiping the demigods, maybe you go to a demigod planet, and there you can enjoy like anything for a long time, much better than here. So you called Taitam Bhukpa Swargalokam Vishalam. Vishalam means very broad. There in Swargaloka in heaven, you can enjoy godly delights for a long, long time. But when your punya is used up, when your pious credits that you got down on earth are used up, you have to fall down again to this earth, which he calls Martya Loka. What's Martya Loka? The world of death. The world of death. That's it. And therefore Krishna says, Evam tahi dhammam anupapanna. By following this Karma Kanda section of the Vedas, you just go and come. It's self-defeating. You're not really making any progress back to Godhead. You're just, enjoying material things, but that results in suffering. Next verse, he says, but on the other hand, ananyas chintayanto mam yejana payupasate. Those who worship me with one pointed attention. Yejana payupasate. Tesham nityabhyuktanam, who are always linked to me in devotion. Yoga kshema vahamyaham. I personally carry their necessities of life and their protection, their security. And when you think about it, that's what material life is all about. Getting your necessities and being secure in your person, that's it. So I personally, make sure of that. So that you don't have, that you can peacefully practice devotional service. So that's what the organization Prabhupada set up. All right, now next verse is really good too, because it has one of the two times he quotes this wonderful verse by Yamunacharya, which I always love to quote. It's twice in the Gita. All right, yatato yapi konteya purushasya vipashyataha indriyani pramatini haranti pasabang manaha. The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. So this is a contrast to the previous verse. You're not really practicing bhakti, and your senses are getting hold of you. Purport: there are many learned sages, philosophers, and transcendentalists who try to conquer the senses, but in spite of their endeavors, even the greatest of them sometimes fall victim to material sense enjoyment due to the agitated mind. Even Vishvamitra, a great sage and perfect yogi, was misled by Menaka into sex enjoyment, although the yogi was endeavoring for sense control with severe types of penance and yoga practice. And of course, there are so many similar instances in the history of the world. Therefore, it is very difficult to control the mind and senses without being fully Krishna conscious. Without engaging the mind in Krishna, one cannot cease such material engagements. A practical example is given by Sri Yamunacharya, a great saint and devotee, who says, now see if you can, I'll say, you say. You ready, Alex? Two Alexes. Yadavadi mama cheta Krishna padada vinde Nava nava rasadhaman yudyatam runtam asit Tadavadi patanadi sangame smayamane Bhavati mukha vikara sushtu nishti vanancha. So Yamunacharya says, since my mind has been engaged in the service of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, and I have been enjoying an ever new transcendental humor Whenever I think of sex life with a woman, my face at once turns from it, and I spit at the thought. Krishna consciousness is such a transcendently nice thing that automatically material enjoyment becomes distasteful. It is as if a hungry man had satisfied his hunger by a sufficient quantity of nutritious eatables. Now, Prabhupada, just to alert you, sometimes as soon as you see the word sufficient or sufficiently, you have to stop for a second and think, does he really mean abundantly, a lot? Because in English from UK, that can mean, that's another meaning. In American English, it means enough, just enough. But this here, I think it's sufficient means a lot. In other words, a hungry man has satisfied his hunger with large quantity of nutritious eatables, right? Maharaj Ambarish also conquered a great yogi, Durvasa Muni, simply because his mind was engaged in Krishna consciousness. Savaimanak Krishna padada bindayo vachangsi vaikunta gunana varnane. So just one note on this Yamunacharya. He was a very precocious young Vaishnav scholar. And he had a debate with the court pundit of one king. I forget the names now. I read this story fairly recently. And it was such an audacious thing because this court pundit had defeated so many other challengers from vastly learned scholars and things like that. And so the king and his wife, they were both kind of amazed. Here's this young boy, he's like 14, 15, and he's taking on this great pundit. And so the king said, look, this is so out of unusual and brave of you that if you win this logical contest, you can have half my kingdom. So Yamuna said, okay, deal. So he then asked these clever questions, which I wish I could remember, but he completely stunned the pundit. He won like anything. I'll try to get a detail on it and pick it up and bring it one. And so the king said, okay, you got half the kingdom. So suddenly this boy was now a king, a major kingdom. And he kind of lost it. He wasn't really fixed in devotional service. So he became a king, and he was enjoying like anything. But those who knew him, after some years, they wanted to try to bring him back to devotional service. So when he was pious, he was. And so someone who I think he had known before came back and said, well, let's go for a walk, And so he agreed and went for a walk. And on that walk, this devotee started chanting all kinds of what we would call nectar shlokas, from his previous days when he was in the ashram, And he was picking up on it and getting into it. He hadn't in years. And he got back into the devotional mood, and he gave up the kingdom and he became renounced. And this is why he could write this verse, because he'd had so much experience as the king, enjoying the harem or whatever the heck it was. You know what I mean? And so he said, whenever I remember that, whenever that comes to mind, God, spit and Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So So here, you see, now 59 says, okay, if you directly perceive the Supreme, you can become fixed in renunciation. But it's a struggle. In other words, then the next verse will resolve it all. And 61 is the first verse in the Gita where Krishna talks about himself, fixing your mind on me. So that solves the whole thing. And yatato, it's striving. Even though you're striving, the senses are so strong that they can get a hold of you. And we've had experience. Devotees also, they get weak in their sadhana, they make an offense. Krishna withdraws the taste, and the senses take you away. So let's do 61. Tani sarvani sangyamya yukta asita matparaha pashahi yasyendriyani tasya pragya pratishtita. One who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, and fixes his consciousness upon me, is known as a man of steady intelligence. You see that? Matparaha. This is where Mat, the first time he mentions himself. Purport that the highest conception of yoga perfection is Krishna consciousness is clearly explained in this verse. And unless one is Krishna conscious, it is not at all possible to control the senses. There's the defining sentence right there. As cited above, the great sage Durvasa Muni picked a quarrel with Maharaj Ambarish, and Durvasa Muni unnecessarily became angry out of pride and therefore could not check his senses. On the other hand, the king, although not as powerful a yogi as the sage, but a devotee of the Lord, silently tolerated all the sage's injustices and thereby emerged victorious. The king was able to control his senses because of the following qualifications, as mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So there's 3 verses, I'll just chant it myself. Savaimana Krishna Padara Bindayo Vachangsi Vaikunda Gunana Varnane Karo Hare Mandira Majanadishu Shutin Chakara Chita Satkato Dehe Mukunda Lingalaya Darshane Drishautar Britya Gatra Sparshinga Sangamam Granam Chatatpara Saroja Saurabe Shimat Tulasya Vasanang Tarapite Pado Hare Cheta Badana Sarpane Shiro Rishikesha Badhabi Bandane Kamam Chadase Natu Kama Kameya Yatotama Shloka Janashaya Ratihi. King Ambarish fixed his mind on the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, engaged his words in describing the abode of the Lord, his hands in cleansing the temple of the Lord, his ears in hearing the pastimes of the Lord, his eyes in seeing the form of the Lord, his body in touching the body of the devotee, his nostrils in smelling the flavor or fragrance of the flowers offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, his tongue in tasting the tulsi leaves offered to him, his legs in traveling to the holy place where his temple is situated, his head in offering obeisances unto the Lord, and his desires in fulfilling the desires of the Lord. And all these qualifications made him fit to become a matpara devotee of the Lord. Now it's interesting, Prabhupada harkens back to the verse. That's 61, that's the phrase, matpara. The word matpara is most significant in this connection. How one can become matpara is described in the life of Maharaj Ambarish. Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan, a great scholar and acharya in the line of the matpara, remarks, Mad Bhakti Prabhavena Sarvendriya Vijaya Purvika Swatma Drishti Sulabheti Bhavaha. The senses can be completely controlled only by the strength of devotional service to Krishna. Boy, there's one to remember, huh? Also, the example of fire is sometimes given. Quote, as a blazing fire burns everything within a room, Lord Vishnu, situated in the heart of the yogi, burns up all kinds of impurities. The Yoga Sutra also prescribes meditation on Vishnu, and not meditation on the void. The so-called yogis who meditate on something other than the Vishnu form simply waste their time in a vain search after some phantasmagoria. We have to be Krishna conscious, devoted to the personality of Godhead. This is the aim of real yoga, of the real yoga. So, Prabhupada brings it all home here. You know, we've got this little phrase, matparaha, which really says it all. All the senses, this is, you remember the question was, how does he sit? The word asita was used. So really, how does he situate his consciousness? Yukta asita matparaha. The senses need to be situated in service to Krishna. This famous phrase, Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam. This is part of the definition of bhakti. Sarvopari vinimuktam tatpara vinimurlam Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam bhakti ruchate. What is bhakti? Bhakti is said to be the service of the Lord of the senses with the senses. And how can one do that? Well, you can use your ears by hearing the holy name or by hearing the Bhagavad Gita. You see? So this is one way of doing it. You can see the eyes by reading, by seeing the deities. You can use the nose by smelling the incense and the flowers. You can use your feet by walking to the temple. I walked to the temple. Many of you walked to the temple. Maybe some of you walked downstairs. But the point is, the feet are properly being used. The hands, so many things you can do, right? You can wash the pots, or you can dress the deities. So the point is, every single sense has a way that it can be engaged. And if it can't be engaged, then the Kurma verse, you can withdraw it. Yada sanghadade chayam kurmon gani visarvasha indiyana niyatasya pragyapatishyata. To be consciousness fixed in Krishna means that you use your senses in Krishna consciousness as appropriate, and when they're not being used in Krishna consciousness, then you don't use them. You don't let them go off and do some other thing. So that, and this Ambarish is such a great example. He's an ordinary king, ordinary meaning that he's wrapped up in so many things having to do with running a kingdom, not the ideal consciousness for being a great devotee, but he was a great devotee. And his mind is remembering Krishna, his words, he's glorifying Krishna. So he was perfectly fixed. And the story is, real quick, is that Durvasa, I never knew what his name meant till about a year ago. Dvasa means you can't live with him. He's just too too proud, too angry, easily angered. I thought it meant that his clothes are far away, that he was naked, but that's something else. That's Vaishya. Anyway, so he tends to fly off the handle, and because he's proud. This is the thing, that having all these powers as a yogi doesn't make you humble. It can make you very proud. And that's why you get all these demons that Krishna killed, they're great yogis. It's not that he killed a big snake, and he killed a calf. These are all great yogi demons who thought it would be good to take those forms in order to get into his, get near Krishna, and then he would kill him. But of course, they were all killed. But that's quite a yogic, power to be able to turn yourself into some big heron, in order to swallow Krishna and all this stuff. So, but they were very proud. Yeah. Probably, he's very famous. Yeah, but he couldn't control it. He was the one, I think, fell down with Menaka. That's mentioned. Yeah. So in other words, Vishayavanivartan, he was restraining his senses maybe for many, many years, but the desire was still there. And as soon as the Indra sent down Menaka, dancing girls, you can imagine how beautiful she was. He had his eyes closed, but she had the ankle bells. What's that? That? Oh, well. And he was gone. But Haridas Thakur, young man, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, twice the one of the Ramchandra Khan was envious, so he sent, make him fall down. He's getting too famous. And then she was converted, became a great devotee. And then Maya Devi herself came and tried to do it. And she couldn't allure him. So he was completely protected, just chanting the holy name. But these great yogis, they, control their senses, but they became very proud. And this Durvasa, he was envious of Ambarish because he's an ordinary king, and Durvasa was a Brahmin, his whole caste, consciousness. So, I don't think we maybe have time. So anyway, he had this plan, how he was going to humiliate Durvasa or Ambarish and put him into a difficult spot. So Ambarish was very strict in following Ekadashi. And Ekadashi, as we know, we found out from this pastime how important it is to break at the right time. Otherwise, he poo-poos it whenever he's living it. Because Prabhupada didn't really worry about it. But we have it in the calendar. So there's a certain time, an interval, when you're supposed to break the fast the next day. Literally, you're supposed to fast from all water and all, and food, and stay up all night. So he was following very strictly, and that means breaking it at the right time, or you lose all the benefits. It's a big offense. So Durvasa arrives just before that time, and he's a great Brahmin, and so he should be invited to break the fast, for breakfast. Says, yes, you can. Okay, fine. I'll just bathe. But he stayed in the water so long that he knew they would put Ambarish on the spot. Because, are we too loud? Okay. So because he knew that Ambarish was very strict, and so he stayed in the water so long, and so on. What am I going to do? I don't want to offend Krishna by not breaking at the right time, but I don't want to offend Durvasa by eating before my guest, because you have to, So he had consulted his Brahmins. They didn't know what to do. He said, maybe I'll just drink water. That breaks the fast but doesn't break the fast. And Durvasa will understand. So he sipped some water. Big deal. So Durvasa could understand by his mystic power, and he took great offense. So much offense, this is the problem. He became very proud. He became enraged. Way out of proportion. Someone just drink a little water. And so he created this female Kritya. I looked it up. It's a big fiery demon. He takes some of his hair. They have all the power in the hair, Rips up hair. Throws it down. This big female demon is made of fire, starts moving toward Ambarish to burn him to ash. Kind of overreaction, little. So Ambarish just stands there. He shows his equanimity, just like Prahlad. He's praying, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. If it's my time, it's my time. And so the chakra, which actually had been given to him by Krishna before, comes and starts threatening Durvasa. First kills the Kritya, obliterates. Then comes after Dvasa, but Dvasa doesn't take the opportunity. Be killed by Krishna's chakra. That's very auspicious. I'll go back to Godhead. No. He was very afraid. He showed his fear, unlike Ambarish, was just completely composed. Just burn me. I don't care. He knew he wasn't his body. So he chases him all the way up to Vaikuntha. And he meets Narayan. He said, please, the chakra. And there's this great, I forget the Sanskrit right now. But he says, I'm not independent. I'm controlled by my devotees. I can't do anything. Narayan says this. It says, Sadhavovadiyam mayam sarunam riyam tadham maranyat te na janati nam te vimanagapi. That's the most famous verse. The sadhus are in my heart and I'm in the sadhus' hearts. They don't know anything but me and I don't know anything but them. And therefore, if you want to get relieved, you have to go back down to Ambarish and surrender, and maybe he'll help you. So he went all the way back down, and this painting of him, surrendering. And of course, Ambarish said, Chakra, please stop, and he said. So this illustrates the power of bhakti over the power of the simply materialistic Ashtanga yoga. Okay, and on that note, do we have any time? Okay, all glory to Srila Prabhupada.